I am Rocco, 35 years old, a construction manager who married Jessica from a wealthy family 2 years ago. We were happy, despite our different backgrounds. For our second anniversary, we got invited to her family estate for an important dinner with extended relatives. I bought a new suit and studied proper dining etiquette, hoping to finally impress her family, who always seemed cold toward me. Jessica was acting strangely nervous before we left, but I figured she just wanted everything to go perfectly. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I turned this humiliating night into the wake-up call that saved my life. I grew up in a hard-working blue-collar family in Michigan. My father was a plumber, and my mother worked as a receptionist at the local clinic. We never had much, but they taught me the value of honest work and self-respect. I started working construction when I was 16, hauling materials and cleaning up sites after school. Those early years were tough, my hands constantly calloused and my back aching, but I saved every dollar possible. After high school, I put myself through community college, while still working nearly full-time. I studied construction management, attending classes in the mornings and working on sites in the afternoons and weekends. It took me almost 5 years to finish what should have been a 2-year degree, but I graduated without debt and with valuable field experience. By 30, I had worked my way up to project manager at a mid-sized construction company. 2 years later, I took the biggest risk of my life and started my own construction management business. The first year was terrifying, sometimes wondering if I would make payroll, but gradually, I built a solid reputation for quality work and fair treatment of both clients and workers. I met Jessica at a charity event 3 years ago. My company had been hired to renovate the community center, hosting the fundraiser, and I was there to oversee some last-minute details. She was a volunteer, helping organize the silent auction. I noticed her immediately, not just because she was beautiful with her chestnut hair and bright green eyes, but because she radiated a warmth when talking to everyone from the catering staff to the major donors. Our worlds could not have been more different. Jessica grew up in what I would call extreme wealth, though she always downplayed it. Her childhood included private schools with tuitions higher than some annual salaries, summer vacations, to exclusive resorts around the world, and a social circle filled with the children of influential families. She never had to worry about college tuition or career pressure. Everything was provided and expected. Her family, especially her father William and mother Eleanor, made their feelings about me clear from our first meeting. They were unfailingly polite in that practiced way of the upper class, but their subtle comments about my occupation and background communicated their disapproval. Once her father asked if I was interested in entering a different line of work, as if construction management was just a temporary phase before finding a real career. Despite their attitudes, I was determined to win them over through honesty and hard work. I believed that if they saw how much I loved Jessica and how committed I was to her happiness, they would eventually accept me. Jessica always reassured me that her family would come around, that they just needed time to see the real me beyond my background. For our second anniversary dinner at her family estate, I wanted everything to be perfect. I spent more than I could afford on a tailored navy suit from a high-end store downtown. The salesperson had to explain the difference between a notch and peak lapel details I had never considered before. I chose the more conservative style, wanting to appear respectable rather than flashy. I got my first professional haircut in years, going to the salon Jessica recommended instead of my usual barber. I even sat through a manicure feeling ridiculous, but knowing Jessica would notice and appreciate the effort. I spent evenings researching wine varietals and fine dining etiquette, watching videos on which fork to use for each course and how to properly hold a wine glass. I bought her parents an expensive crystal vase from a brand Jessica mentioned they collected. It stretched my budget even further, but I wanted to show my appreciation for the invitation. I practiced potential conversation topics, reading up on current events and cultural references her family might discuss. I even rehearsed anecdotes about my business that highlighted my success without sounding boastful. The drive to her family estate took nearly an hour, leaving the city behind for increasingly exclusive suburbs until we reached the private road leading to their property. The house was actually a mansion by any reasonable definition, with manicured gardens and a circular driveway around a fountain. A staff member appeared to park our car as soon as we arrived, making me self-conscious about my 5-year-old Chevy among the luxury vehicles. Stepping inside was like entering a different world. The entryway opened to a grand foyer with marble floors and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my first house. Family members were already gathered in the main living room, some I recognized from our wedding and others I was meeting for the first time. There were her aunts and uncles, all dressed impeccably, and holding crystal glasses of something amber-colored. Her cousins stood in small groups, their posture and mannerisms so similar it was clear they had grown up together in the same social circles. Several children, ranging from around 8 to 14, were being supervised by a woman I assumed was a nanny in another room. Jessica introduced me to everyone, but I noticed she became increasingly distant with each introduction. Her hand, initially warm in mine, grew cold, and eventually she stopped touching me altogether. She drifted between family members with practiced ease, leaving me to fend for myself with relatives who asked polite questions but rarely maintained conversation beyond my answers. After about 30 minutes of increasingly uncomfortable mingling, Jessica pulled me aside near a large potted plant in the corner. Her eyes darted around, making sure no one was within earshot. "I just want to give you a heads up about dinner," she said, her voice hushed. "My family has certain traditions about these formal gatherings." "What kind of traditions?" I asked. "Well, the seating arrangements can be a bit complicated," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "My father is very particular about these things. Just follow my lead when dinner is announced." "Okay." I nodded, confused, but willing to accommodate whatever strange upper-class customs they observed. I assumed maybe they had a specific seating chart based on family hierarchy or something equally formal. Jessica quickly rejoined a conversation with her cousin before I could ask for clarification. The dinner announcement came precisely at 7:30, when a butler, an actual butler, entered the room and announced in a formal tone that dinner was served. Everyone began moving toward the large dining room I had glimpsed earlier. Jessica was across the room talking to her mother, and when I caught her eye, she gave me a quick, tight smile that did nothing to ease my growing anxiety. I followed the crowd into the dining room, momentarily stunned by the elaborate setup. A massive table dominated the center of the room, covered in a white linen tablecloth and set with china, crystal, and more silverware than I had ever seen at one place setting. Candles and silver holders cast a warm glow over everything, and fresh flower arrangements created a fragrant centerpiece running the length of the table. As guests began finding their seats, I noticed name cards at each place. I scanned for mine, but could not find it among those at the main table. Jessica finally approached me, her expression a mix of discomfort and apology. "Rocco," she said softly. "They have you sitting at the other table." She gestured vaguely toward an adjoining room. I glanced over and felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. Through the doorway was a smaller room with a much smaller table, clearly set for children. The plastic cups and simpler place settings made the distinction unmistakable. "The kids' table?" I asked, hoping I had misunderstood. Jessica bit her lip and lowered her voice even further. "It is just how my family does things. New spouses need to earn their place at the main table. It is a silly tradition, I know, but my father insists. We can talk about it later." Before I could respond, she was being called by her mother to take her seat near the head of the main table. She squeezed my arm briefly and whispered, "Please, just go with it for tonight. It will be fine." I stood frozen for a moment as everyone else settled at their places. Then, feeling like I was in some bizarre dream, I walked stiffly into the adjoining room. 5 children looked up at me curiously as I approached the small table. The oldest could not have been more than 14, the youngest around 8. "Is this seat taken?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light as I pointed to one of the empty chairs. A little girl with Jessica's green eyes, presumably her young cousin, shook her head. "Are you Uncle William's new worker?" she asked innocently. "No, I am Jessica's husband," I replied, lowering myself into the child-sized chair that creaked under my weight. The children exchanged glances. "Why are you sitting with us then?" the oldest boy asked. I tried to smile. "Good question. I think this is where they want me." The dinner itself was a surreal exercise in maintaining dignity, while feeling utterly humiliated. The chairs were too small, forcing me to sit with my knees nearly touching my chest. The children, after their initial curiosity, largely ignored me and talked among themselves about video games and school activities. From my position, I could see directly into the main dining room. Jessica sat between her mother and a man I did not recognize, laughing at something he said with more animation than she had shown all evening. Her father sat at the head of the table, occasionally glancing in my direction with what looked like satisfaction. I picked at my food, a child-sized portion of the same gourmet meal being served at the main table. The conversation from the adults drifted into the room where I sat, and I caught snippets that made my ears burn. "He certainly is persistent, I will give him," that one of her uncles commented. "The construction fellow," her aunt replied. "Well, Jessica always did have a charitable streak." Laughter followed, not quite loud enough to be obviously directed at me, but clear enough that I knew I was the subject. Midway through the main course, the door opened, and a latecomer entered, apologizing profusely for his delay. Jessica's entire face lit up as she stood to greet him with a warm hug. My stomach tightened as I recognized him from photos Jessica had once shown me. Alexander, her ex-boyfriend from college, son of a banking executive, and apparently still very much in the family's good graces. Within minutes, the staff had set a place for him at the main table right across from Jessica. No kids' table for Alexander, despite not even being family. One of the children, a curious girl of about 10, looked at me with unexpected perception. "Are you okay? Your face is really red." "I am fine," I assured her, forcing a smile. "Just a little warm in here. My mom says Jessica should have married Alexander," she continued with the brutal honesty of children. "They dated forever and everyone thought they would get married. Is that so?" I managed, taking a large gulp of water. "Yeah, my dad says Alexander has the right pedigree, whatever that means." I nodded, unable to respond as I watched Jessica and Alexander laughing together like old friends. Her father raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he announced. "To traditions and maintaining the standards that have made us who we are." Everyone at the main table raised their glasses in response. Not one person glanced in my direction. Sitting there, squeezed into a child's chair, while my wife dined with the adults and her ex-boyfriend, something inside me finally broke. Not in a dramatic, angry way, but in a quiet realization that I had compromised my dignity trying to be accepted by people who had no intention of ever seeing me as an equal. My father had always told me that respect was not something you could beg for. Either people gave it freely or they did not, and no amount of trying to earn it would change a mind already made up. I had ignored his wisdom, believing that Jessica's family was different, that they would eventually see my worth if I just tried hard enough. I pulled out my phone under the table and texted my friend Thomas need a ride. "At Jessica's family estate. Can you come now? Emergency." His response was immediate. "On my way. 20 minutes. You? Okay. We'll explain later," I replied. "Thanks." I spent those 20 minutes calculating my exit. I needed to leave without causing a scene that would embarrass Jessica or give her family more reason to look down on me. I did not want drama or confrontation, just the preservation of whatever self-respect I had left. When I received Thomas's text that he was approaching the property, I quietly excused myself from the children's table. None of them seemed particularly concerned by my departure. I walked calmly through the dining room, not making eye contact with anyone, and continued to the foyer where our coats were kept. I heard Jessica call my name just as I was putting on my coat, but I pretended not to hear. From the corner of my eye, I saw her notice me leaving, but then turn back to continue her conversation with Alexander. That single moment told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in her priorities. Rather than exit through the front door where I might be seen, I slipped out a side entrance and began the long walk down the driveway in the darkness. The night air was cold against my face, but it felt clarifying after the suffocating atmosphere inside. Thomas's headlights appeared just as I reached the main road, and I quickly got into his car. "What the hell happened?" Thomas asked as soon as I closed the car door. "You look like someone died." The emotion I had been suppressing all evening suddenly broke free, and to my horror, I found myself fighting back tears. I explained everything in halting sentences: the kids' table, Jessica's behavior, her ex-boyfriend's arrival, and my decision to leave. Thomas listened in shocked silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Are you serious? They put you at the kids' table. Your own wife let that happen." He was furious on my behalf, which somehow made it both better and worse. Better, because his outrage validated my feelings; worse, because saying it all out loud made the humiliation even more real. "They do not think I am good enough," I finally said. "They never will." And Jessica, she just went along with it. My phone began buzzing in my pocket. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. I silenced it without answering. "She is calling," I told Thomas. "Are you going to answer?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I need to think. Thomas nodded and kept driving toward his apartment. You can crash at my place tonight. By the time we reached his apartment, Jessica had called 4 more times and sent a series of increasingly urgent text messages. Where are you? The first one read. Then why did you leave without saying anything? Followed by, please call me. My parents are asking where you went. And finally, Rocco, this is ridiculous. Answer your phone. I turned my phone off completely and accepted Thomas's offer of a beer. We sat in his living room, the television on mute in the background, and talked about what had happened and what it meant for my marriage. An hour passed, then another. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were 27 missed calls and 16 text messages. Most were from Jessica, but there were also calls from her mother, her father, and even numbers I did not recognize but assumed were other family members. The tone of Jessica's messages had shifted dramatically, from annoyed to desperate. Please call me immediately. It is an emergency. Dad collapsed after dinner. We are at Memorial Hospital. The doctors need information about his medication allergies. You have that list from when you took him to his appointment last month. Please call. I felt a cold rush of adrenaline. Despite everything that had happened, I would never want anything bad to happen to Jessica's father. 3 months ago, I had taken William to a doctor's appointment when he had chest pains because everyone else was out of town. The doctor had given me a comprehensive list of his conditions and medication allergies after discovering he was taking a potentially dangerous combination of prescriptions. I immediately called Jessica back. Oh, thank God, she answered, her voice thick with tears. Where have you been? What happened to your father? I asked, ignoring her question. He collapsed right after dessert. The doctors think it might be a reaction to a new medication they gave him today. They need to know what he is allergic to before they can treat him. You have that information right. I did have it saved in my phone from that appointment. A moral dilemma flashed through my mind. These people had humiliated me, made me feel less than human. Did I owe them anything? But this was not about revenge or pride. A man's health was at stake regardless of how he had treated me. I would not stoop to their level. Yes, I have the information. I will text it to you right now, I said already, pulling up the notes from that day. Thank God. Can you come to the hospital? I hesitated, then made my decision. I will send the information, but I am not coming there tonight. Rocco, please, she began. No, Jessica. I need some time to think. What happened tonight was not okay. I know I am so sorry, she said quickly. But we can talk about that later. Right now we need you here. You have the medical information. That is all I can give right now. After sending the details of William's medication, allergies, and known conditions, I ended the call despite Jessica's continued pleas. Within minutes, she called back to confirm they had received the information and that the doctors were now treating her father with the correct protocol. But this time her tone changed. Where are you? I will come to you. I am at Thomas's apartment, I said after a moment of consideration. Stay there. I am coming as soon as Dad is stabilized. True to her word, Jessica arrived at Thomas's door nearly 2 hours later. Thomas tactfully made himself scarce, retreating to his bedroom with a meaningful look in my direction. Jessica looked exhausted, her makeup smeared from crying, and her hair falling loose from its earlier perfect arrangement. Thank you for sending that information, she said as she sat on the couch beside me. The doctor said it made all the difference. Dad is going to be okay. I am glad, I replied stiffly. Rocco, about tonight. She began, her voice breaking slightly. I am so sorry. I should never have allowed that to happen. I looked at her directly. No, you should not have. Do you have any idea how that felt? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I do now. When you were gone and Dad was sick, I realized how badly I had messed up. I chose their approval over your dignity, and I am ashamed. It is not just about tonight, Jessica. This is about our entire relationship. You have been trying to make me fit into your family's world, while they have made it clear they do not want me there. And instead of standing up for me, you have been playing both sides, hoping I would somehow earn their approval. Jessica wiped her eyes. You are right. I have been a coward. I was raised to never challenge my family, especially my father. Their approval has always been everything to me. I need to know where your priorities lie, I told her. Because I cannot continue in a marriage where I come second to your family's outdated ideas about social class. You do not come second, she insisted, reaching for my hand. I love you more than anything. Tonight made that so clear to me. When you were gone and everything was falling apart, all I could think about was how much I needed you, not just for the medical information, but because you are my rock. I want to believe that, I said. But I need time to think. And I need some space. We talked for hours that night, delving into issues we had been avoiding since the beginning of our relationship. Jessica admitted that she had always hoped her family would eventually accept me, and that she had failed to stand up to them because she feared losing their approval. I confessed my own insecurities about our different backgrounds, and how tonight had confirmed my worst fears about never being good enough. In the end, we agreed to take some time apart. She would return to our home and I would stay with Thomas for a few days while we both considered what we wanted for our future. I do not know if our marriage will survive this, I told her honestly. But I know I cannot go back to how things were. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I will fight for us, Rocco. I promise. And I will start by telling my family exactly how wrong they were. During the weeks that followed, I moved into a small apartment of my own. The space gave me time to reflect on not just my marriage, but my life as a whole. I realized how much of myself I had compromised, trying to fit into Jessica's world, neglecting my own friends and family in the process. I reconnected with my parents, spending weekends at their modest home and remembering the values they had instilled in me. I called friends I had not spoken to in months, rebuilding connections that had once been central to my life. These were people who accepted me exactly as I was, who valued me for my character rather than my social standing. At work, I refocused on building my business according to my own values rather than trying to make it impressive enough for Jessica's family. I took on projects I believed in, even if they were not prestigious, and prioritized treating my employees well over maximizing profits. I also started seeing a therapist, something I had never considered before. Those sessions helped me recognize patterns in my behavior, how I had always sought approval from people who withheld it while taking for granted those who genuinely cared for me. I learned to recognize my own worth independent of others' validation. Meanwhile, Jessica was going through her own transformation. She called regularly, respecting my need for space, but making it clear she was not giving up on our marriage. Through these conversations, I learned that she had confronted her family in a way she never had before. She told me about the explosive argument with her father once he recovered from his health scare, how she had finally spoken the truth about his treatment of me, and how it reflected on him, not me. She described her mother's tearful realization of how they had hurt not just me but their relationship with their daughter. Jessica had also started therapy, unpacking the expectations and conditional love that had shaped her since childhood. She shared insights about her own fears of rejection and how they had led her to seek constant approval from her family. For the first time, she was examining these dynamics instead of blindly perpetuating them. Most surprisingly, she made genuine efforts to understand my world. She visited my parents without me, spending a day helping my mother in her garden and listening to my father's stories about my childhood. She took an interest in my business, not as something to be improved or elevated, but as something to be understood and respected. After 2 months of separation, we agreed to meet for dinner at a neutral location, a simple neighborhood restaurant I had always liked. But Jessica had previously considered too casual. She arrived wearing jeans instead of her usual designer outfit, a small detail that nonetheless spoke volumes. "We have been invited to my parents' house next weekend," she said after we had ordered. A small family dinner. I tensed immediately, memories of the disastrous anniversary dinner still fresh. Jessica reached across the table for my hand. "They want to apologize in person. But I told them you might not be ready, and that is completely okay. I will support whatever decision you make." I searched her face for any sign of manipulation or pressure, but found only sincerity. "I will think about it," I promised. 2 weeks later, I did agree to meet with her family again, but on my terms. The dinner would be at our home, not their estate. Jessica and I would prepare the food together, and the guest list would be limited to her parents and us. No extended family, no ex-boyfriends, no audience, for whatever was about to happen. William and Eleanor arrived exactly on time, both looking uncomfortable in the modest surroundings of the home Jessica and I had shared. Eleanor brought flowers, a peace offering that seemed genuine, if awkward. William, still somewhat weakened from his health scare, extended his hand to me with an expression I had never seen on his face before: humility. "Rocco," he said, clearing his throat, "I owe you an apology. Several, in fact." The dinner that followed was stilted at first, but gradually evolved into the most honest conversation I had ever had with Jessica's parents. William admitted that his preconceptions about my background had blinded him to my character. Eleanor confessed that she had gone along with his judgments out of habit rather than forming her own opinion. "I do not expect us to become best friends overnight," William said near the end of the evening. "But I want you to know that I respect how you handled everything, including my medical emergency. You showed more character by helping me, after how we treated you, than I did in all my years of supposed success." It was a start, imperfect, but genuine. As they were leaving, William shook my hand again, this time meeting my eyes fully. "Thank you for giving us another chance. My daughter loves you, and I am beginning to understand why." Jessica and I continued rebuilding our relationship, slowly establishing new patterns based on mutual respect, rather than accommodation and compromise. We created our own traditions, incorporating elements from both our backgrounds, but prioritizing what felt right for us as a couple over external expectations. 6 months after that disastrous anniversary dinner, we renewed our vows in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. Jessica's family attended, sitting side by side with mine on folding chairs on the lawn. There was no hierarchy, no separate tables, just two families beginning to become one. Our marriage is stronger now, built on a foundation of hard-earned wisdom, rather than idealistic hopes. We still have moments of tension when our different backgrounds create misunderstandings, but we face them together instead of allowing them to push us apart. I have learned that self-respect is not negotiable, that true partnership means standing together even when it is difficult. Jessica has learned that family is not about pedigree or tradition, but about love and acceptance. Together we are creating our own definition of success, one based on authenticity rather than appearances. Looking back, I am almost grateful for that humiliating night. It forced us to confront issues we had been avoiding, and ultimately led us to a more genuine connection than we had ever had before. Sometimes the most painful moments become the catalysts for the most important growth. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself at the cost of a relationship? Did it end up strengthening your connection like it did for me and Jessica? Or did you find yourself on a different path entirely? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of self-discovery and relationship growth. Thank you for listening, and remember that true worth comes from within, not from anyone else's approval.